you ready.
All right, fellas. 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to the Sumter School District Board of Trustees Policy Subcommittee meeting. Please join me for a meditative thought followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is held in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. This meeting is open to the public, but with limited first-come, first-served seating due to COVID-19. All persons wishing to attend the meeting by virtual means may do so via YouTube, Sumter School District Board Meetings, and Sumter School District's Facebook page. The mission of Sumter School District is to equip students to be responsible, successful, and productive citizens in a global society. Vision: Sumter School District develops and cultivates competitive students who embrace diversity, act responsibly, and contribute positively to society. This evening you have before you Brian Austin, yours truly as the chairman of the policy committee, Ms. Adrian Singletary, Ms. Albertha Bannister that's joining us virtually, Ms. Andrea Loney that's here in the room with us, Mr. Bobby Anderson that is joining us virtually. I don't see Ms. Canty or Ms. Hilton. We have Dr. Shirley Gamble here in the room with us, and Mr. Steve Corley is joining us virtually. We also have staff members joining us this evening, Mr. Sam Myers, Dr. Lamont Moore, and Ms. Jennifer Miller. I see you as well. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day. To our subcommittee members, thank you and welcome for offering your time to do this heavy lift of work with the governing of the school district through our policy committee. So thank you once again and welcome. I look forward to working with you so that we can move the Sumter School District forward. At this time, we will do introductions. I'm going to start with the individuals that we have virtually. So Mr. Corley or Ms. Albertha Bannister, you're the only female on the call, so I'll let you start first. You're muted.
Hi everyone, I am Albertha Bannister, retired, worked for 20 some odd years for Sumter School District 2, and 1 year with the Consolidated District. I was the coordinator for special education services for the district.
Welcome.
Happy to be here and ready to do the work.
Thank you.
Steve Corley, taught at Sumter High for 33 years, and got elected to Sumter City Council, and I got the privilege of being on this policy committee. Thank you.
Welcome. Mr. Anderson, it's on you.
Bobby Anderson, 26 years at the Career Center and as director, and been on the finance committee earlier, and I am now on this policy committee, subcommittee of the citizens committee. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and to give input.
Thank you, sir. Welcome. I'm going to go to our guests that are with us here in the district office. I know which side of the room you guys want to start on.
I'm Andrea Loney from South Carolina Legal Services. We are a statewide nonprofit law firm that represents low-income people in civil actions.
I'm Shirley Gamble, principal of Crestwood High School. I've been a principal there for 7 years.
I'm Adrian Singletary, and I'm currently the City of Sumter Recreation Complex Coordinator, and also a product of the Sumter School District as a graduate of Crestwood High School.
And for our committee members, I'm Brian Austin, the chair of the policy committee, and I represent Area 1, which is the northwestern portion of Sumter County. So again, thank you and welcome to the policy subcommittee.
Let me introduce myself.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Timothy Martin Knox, Superintendent of Sumter School District.
And Ms. Hanson?
Amy Hanson, Administrative Manager to the Superintendent and Board of Trustees.
Thank you. And I'm going to get our staff that's on the call. Could you please introduce yourself as well?
I'm Samuel Myers, Executive Director of Operations. Good evening.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Lamont Moore, Director of Testing, Accountability, Gifted and Talented, Title III. So it's a pleasure to join you once again, and thank you.
Thank you. We're now down to item number 2, which is the agenda. Everyone has been privy to a copy of the agenda. If there are no objections to the agenda will stand approved. Any objections? Hearing none, the agenda will stand approved. We're down to item 3, to review a policy subcommittee. 3.1 is policy committee report updates. And I'm just going to give you all a update on the policy updates that were shared with the full board at our August 9th meeting. And after each update, I'll give you an opportunity to field any questions or provide any input that you may have. Sounds good? So the policy committee met on July 20th and received updates from Dr. Martin Knox and the Director of Testing, Accounting, GT, and Title III, Dr. Lamont Moore, regarding policy ACB, Educational Equity and Equity Matters of the District. As a reminder, a team has been put together to review the policy and implement strategies to address equity matters in the district. The review team is looking at consulting with an outside agency that can provide hard data revealing where the district is in terms of equity. That will include a review of fiscal and human resources practices that will assist us in developing an equity plan to support the policy or assist us in developing additional language or an additional policy as needed. Is there any questions or input on the equity policy? And Dr. Moore, if you want to expound on where we are with the equity policy, you're more than welcome to do that at this time.
Absolutely. So right now we are looking at 2 companies. We're trying to make a decision between the 2. The first company is Inside Advance, and they specialize in equity audits and also providing some extensive professional development to teachers responding to whatever the equity audit will reveal. The other group is their Hanover Research Group, and they also specialize on the equity audit, but they don't have the extensive professional development. So they are preparing proposals that we will vet with our equity team and make a decision on which company we're going to go with. I think the key thing is going to be how soon we want to start with the professional development piece. We know we definitely want the equity audit. That seems to be what the team is interested in, and both companies can do that. It's just going to be, I think, the deciding factor how soon we want to start on professional development. The task that we're giving both organizations at this point is to come up with a timeline for what that would look like in our school district, and that's a piece that we haven't asked them for. And so I have a meeting scheduled with one of them, with Hanover Research Group tomorrow, and with the Inside Advance Group on next week. And so from there, we're going to take their proposals, bring the equity team together to have them look over them, and then present the information to our district leaders for their blessing, and then we'll be ready to get started with the company we want to go with. So that's where we are in the process. We're still targeting to get this equity audit done within the first semester and use those results to come up with an equity plan that will kind of guide us to start responding to the data that we received from the audit.
Can you give us again what you will be looking at
professional development, and what else?
So the equity audit basically looks at our practices as a district, how we're, as far in multiple areas. Human resources, our hiring practices, fiscal resources, how we spend money on different schools. It's gonna audit all of our different operational pieces, and then they will give us what they found, what they audited, and what that data looks like. They also provide recommendations for us, so that's a huge chunk of it. The professional development piece will come after that audit piece is done, and if we want to pull teachers in, we have a lot of competing things going on in our school district with professional development, and so that's going to be a discussion for the equity team to decide when is the appropriate time to roll out professional development and the best way to do it. So we haven't had a lot of dialogue about what that's going to look like. We kind of want to get through the equity audit and see what it reveals, and then start seeing where those discussions take us. But this process will involve a lot of those pieces, looking at it, and they're going to be consulting with us to provide some best practices, what they've seen in other districts, and recommendations specific to Sumter.
Any other questions? Any questions from those that's joining us virtually?
Are there, how many other districts across the state have done this sort of thing?
There are several, and both companies have worked with them. Richland 1, Richland 2. Richland 2 is huge with the Hanover Research Group. They've mentioned some of the Midlands, I think Charleston. I'm trying to remember, they gave me a list of them. I can provide that list with specific, but there are about 5 to 6 districts that both companies have worked with, and they also have both worked with the South Carolina Department of Ed as it relates to equity as well. So they're familiar with a lot of the districts here and some similar districts to us as well. So they have experience in South Carolina, and we're just interested to see what they will recommend for our district.
Mr. Chair, I had a question.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Is there something that's brought up this need for an equity study? I'm just trying to figure out, you see serious inequities, or what's perpetuating this?
This issue of equity was brought up as we are there's only a handful of districts across the state that actually have equity policies, and it was brought up.
Speaking to the mic, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
This was brought up as a result of there's only a handful of districts across the state that actually have equity policies in place. And so to have Sumter at the forefront, I thought it was necessary for us to look at equity as a district and be at the forefront of this movement as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the equity policy, or any questions for Dr. Moore?
What pricing do we think is going to be, how expensive is this?
Well, it's going to range. It's going to really depend on our level of support. And so that's going to be part of the proposals. They've given us a range as far as the price is concerned. Of course, we want to probably start with our most urgent need, which is the equity audit itself. And so that's what they're working on now, to give us some figures to look at.
Based on the other districts, what would you expect it to be?
I've seen as low as 13,000 and as high as 60. So there's a huge range of what you want, the level of service that you want. Both companies seem to offer services within those ranges. If we are looking for more intensive consultants to be in our district on a frequent basis, then of course it'll be higher. But if we just want more, just the reporting of the data pieces, it'll be closer to the lower end.
And Mr. Anderson, to that point, to answer your question, what we will have to do as a district is to make sure that we are in compliance with our procurement processes, and we will do a request for proposal in order to have companies apply to do the work, and to make sure that the services that we need are being offered by that company, and of course making sure that the financial impact allows us to do the work effectively, but without also breaking the bank, if you will.
Right.
Ms. Hunter.
How many companies does your procurement policy require you to get bids from?
So we usually look at 2 or more, and we will keep it posted until we can get viable individuals to apply.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I see that we have another subcommittee member that has joined us, and we have another staff member that has joined us as well. So, Ms. Hilton, if you would introduce yourself to the committee and to the Sumter School District community, and followed by Mr. Williams.
Sure, good afternoon. First, let me apologize for just joining. I'm homesick from work, so I apologize. But I'm Rosa Hilton. I am employed with the South Carolina Department of Corrections as a program reentry coordinator. And I'm grateful to be a part of this subcommittee. And thank you guys. That's all I have for you right now.
Thank you, and hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
I'm Kelvin Williams. I'm the district hearing officer, and I'm glad to be here with you guys this evening.
Thank you and welcome. And Mr. Williams, you came in right on time. The next policy update is on policy KLGA. The review of possible amendments regarding policy KLGA, school resource officers, was received by Dr. Martin Knox, the Executive Director of Operations, Mr. Samuel Myers, and District Discipline Hearing Officer and Safe School Coordinator, Kelvin Williams. Mr. Myers and Mr. Williams attended a state conference with school resource officers and received valuable information from law enforcement from across the state. Mr. Myers shared that memorandums of understanding have been received by the city and county, and discussions had taken place to ensure a blending of the documents. Mr. Williams shared suggested amendments will speak to specific training for school resource officers, and discussions continue to address the matter of Category 3 offenses as defined by the state. The state has already amended some of the Category 3 offenses. Committee members received suggested amendments in their meeting material. Discussion included the importance that staff and administration receive the training that they are the disciplinarians and that they are responsible for maintaining order in the schools. The school resource officers are not disciplinarians, and they are in place to deal with criminal matters. It was suggested to confirm the language of when school resource officers are to become involved. Safety plans and drills are being scheduled and executed with the inclusion of outside agencies as applicable. Executive staff members recently received training on defibrillators and first aid training by lead nurse Michelle Devine. Is there any questions, or Mr. Myers or Mr. Williams want to expound or tell us where we are with that process?
Yes, well, good evening. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to share. Mr. Williams and I and the committee members have been working extensively with the MOUs that we've received from the county and the city. One of the main things that we wanted to ensure was that we could remove the punitive language from the messages that are part of the MOU. And we've worked extensively to try to pull that together. We've done a really good job with that. As Chairman Alston stated, Ms. Williams and I did attend the state conference, and Mr. Williams conducted a training with our SROs to give them some insight and talk about the roles of SROs. One of the key points to that is that we want to have SROs to develop a relationship with not only the administration, but with the students and the staff, because as they are a part of that setting, we always want them to be connected to all of the workings that are happening within that school. We do want SROs to always know their roles, and we will be providing additional trainings, and I'm going to ask Mr. Williams to just add some finer points to that as we move forward. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. As Mr. Myers stated earlier, we did meet with the SROs to go over expectations and get some input from them about some of the challenges we're working with in the relationship with the school district itself, And we did a follow-up meeting with our building level administrators as well, to discuss with them what the expectation is for the SRO and the importance of building those relationships and establishing those expectations together in the building level. We do have meetings scheduled for monthly meetings with the SROs to keep those open lines of communication. And as Mr. Myers stated, we are still working on fine-tuning the MOU so that we can have a document that will speak to the school district as a whole instead of the individual entities. Thank you.
Any questions from in the boardroom or online?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Corley, we're gonna get to Dr. Gamble, then I'm gonna get you, okay?
Mr. Williams.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Williams mentioned that there will be monthly meetings with the SROs. Will there be any combined meetings with principals and SROs?
Mr. Williams, could you hear the question?
Yes, the plan is, as we build our agenda, of course, at this point, we're still shading with the pandemic and working through those, the issues we have with the pandemic, but in the future, we do plan to have joint meetings, as we discuss expectations and continue doing this, the relationships.
Thank you.
Dr. Corley.
Yes. Thank you. I took some graduate courses in the 70s and 80s, when many of you were very young. And one of the top issues that comes up again and again in surveys of parents is school safety. So please don't underestimate what our SROs do and what our principals do. School safety. Children are dropped off. Whatever, 16, 17,000 children are dropped off every day in our schools. And if we can't be sloppy on this, we need to be careful and deliberate and be sure our schools are safe, our principals and our discipline is supported by the administration, by the board. It's just very important. I hear people in my ward I live in downtown, Willow Drive and Croswell, and I've heard parents moving to other school options. And you know what they bring up? Discipline. And so SROs play a big part, and we need to support them. We need to be sure they're doing what's appropriate. But we need to have a very safe, do you hear what I'm saying, Mr. Williams and Dr. Myers? Yeah, that we don't underestimate what they do, and please, we need to support our principals as firmly as we can. Thank you.
I'd like to add to that.
Ms. Anderson, 1 second. We have Ms. Loney next, and then I'll get to you, okay?
Is there an existing MOU
Mr. Myers or Mr.
between the district and each school, or how does the MOU work now?
The question was, is there an existing MOU and how does the MOUs work now?
There are existing MOUs, however, they're built on the individual agency. And part of this process that was mentioned earlier, taking out the punitive language, making sure that the law enforcement officers in our buildings are seen in a positive fashion, not as just like in better words, the police that's going to take you to jail. Identifying the fine lines between what's administrative role and what's law enforcement role, what's criminal. Also, the SROs is basically highlighting some of the skill sets that they possess, like the mentoring and the counseling piece, not only with our students, but serving as those support for the staff, administration, as well as community as a whole. So what we're trying to build in this process, or heighten in this process, is just a stronger relationship. We don't want our kids, when they see law enforcement, to see them as a negative thing. They're a positive support system in the building, and we just want our language and our literature to align with that aspect. That is our overall arching goal.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
I'd like to add on there, just, I don't know what you were saying then, was that you're exactly right. We want them to see our resource officers as positive role models and as a positive addition to the school process. However, we want to make sure too that the ones that could cause problems or interrupt in the school understand that those resource officers are there to help stop them and do whatever has to be done to prevent the other folks from being harmed from the ones that would cause problems. And but on the discipline, I've said this many times in other meetings I've been in. You cannot teach an undisciplined child. And one or two undisciplined children in a classroom really takes away from the school process, learning process. And I would like to see stronger emphasis on discipline, and where the students understand from the get-go at the beginning of the year that that will not be tolerated with as far as problems in school is concerned, and insolence and this sort of thing. So, and I'm sure you'll have that in place to a point, but I just remember years ago, and I've said this, you've heard me say this before, I think, Dr. Knott, that some years ago we had a policy that said anybody that missed more than 10 days would not get credit for the year. We didn't have any absentees hardly for 1 or 2 years. And then the Board of Trustees began to ease up and let off 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 over the 10 days, and all of a sudden that policy was out of the window. But so if you start with discipline, stay with discipline, and with as far as setting the goals and things, so that whenever a student gives teachers a hard time, well, they disrupt the classroom, but we're going to do something with them, and they understand that, and they won't just be talked to it and patted on the hand and sent back to class. That's demoralizing to the teacher, and it gives the other students in the classroom the go button to do what they want to do and not get in trouble. So I'm very supportive of discipline in the school all the way through, and include the school buses. By the way, many people talk about that, talking about folks going to other schools. They want to be transferred because they can get into a place where they can make sure their child is safe going to school. So on those buses, I hope we've got cameras on there and whatnot, but if we can assure that people across the county that the buses are going to be safe, and that their child, especially little first, second, third graders, are going to be safe on that bus, I think you'll see more people want to ride the bus and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Ms. Loney?
Will you all also look at the qualifications of the school resource officer? And if this doesn't exist right now, the amount of input that someone in the school district should have in making the selection of the resource officer. And finally, give some consideration for the school resource officer, if at all possible, to come from the community where the school is located.
You know, excuse me, there has been extensive training through the various agencies, be it the city or the county, and they make the selections of their SROs based off their guidelines and the connection to the community and the ways that they know that they can serve best. And we have to rely on those two agencies or those two bodies to provide us with the appropriate personnel. And then with the special training that they take them through, they're adequately trained and ready to be a part of the school system. And thus the reason why we come together to bring administration and the SROs together to talk about and develop that relationship so we can marry up together and make this relationship one that works extremely well. So they do have the training based off their various agencies. and we receive them and everyone works together.
So right now, are you saying that the school district really doesn't have a lot of input in who the resource officer will be, that's pretty much coming from either the police department or the sheriff's department? I'm simply asking, I don't know if you heard me. Oh.
Did you hear that, Mr. Myers?
From what we gathered, that is the individual agency selection, but every SRO officer has to go through SRO training. And in addition to that, one of the things we talked about moving forward is joint training to ensure that our techniques kind of align with their techniques. So we looked at our SROs in the future getting trained in the area of child development, child analysis development, age-appropriate responding, students with special service or disabilities, conflict resolution and de-escalation based on how the school staff is trained, restorative practice, coach competency, threat assessments, and so on and so forth, in addition to our discipline code. So we're trying to bridge that issue by making sure that we're jointly trained and thinking along similar lines. We looked at the relationship with the SRO school district like a marriage, with two people coming in with different perspectives and different beliefs. To make that marriage work, you have to align as many parts of the relationship as possible. And the training aspect, in addition to what they come to the table with, we feel is going to help us get to that point. So that is one of the areas that we talked about, some joint training, and the SRO training that Mr. Myers, state conference that Mr. Myers and I went to. We talked about all SROs attending in the future to look at that so that we're receiving all the same information at the same time. So training is one of those areas that we want to highlight in the MOU to take beyond the normal requirements of the SRO, which is a sworn law enforcement agency officer as well as SRO training.
Thank you.
Dr. Martin, there's been, just from this discussion, there's been the conversation around discipline. And I know that since you have been superintendent, you have always stressed the importance of social and emotional learning, and that if a child is not socially or emotionally prepared for school, then they're not going to succeed or do well in school. So could you speak on that and how that's being used to address discipline in schools?
Absolutely. So, good evening again. So every one of our children come to school with different backgrounds, different lived experiences. And the work that we've been doing is making sure that we are isolating the problem to get to the root of it. When we talk about discipline, discipline is truly about changing the behavior. And what I need us to begin to wrap our heads around, while we may have law enforcement in our schools, they are simply the school's resource officers and not the disciplinarians. Right. If you look at the situations around the nation that have sparked controversy or that have sparked attention, it's usually when you have that individual who is designated to be in the building to serve as a role model, to serve as support, to serve as that bridge and that conduit between school and home and school and the community, to make sure that we are educating our children about the appropriate and inappropriate ways in which they should conduct themselves. And so until we begin to separate the two and recognize that every child does not need to have the punitive measures that have often taken place, which causes what you would, if you will, what research classifies as the school to prison pipeline. When we are preparing our children and disciplining them in a capacity that lets them know that, if I am sanctioned and I am, held accountable in the court of law, that it's not just the slap on the wrist, that this could impact your life for years or even impact your life permanently. So we want to make sure that we are educating our children. And that begins with having positive role models, but also giving children the space to be able to process what they're going through at that particular point in time. and now is even more heightened as we are navigating through the pandemic. Our children have been quarantined, our children have been isolated, so those social skills that are usually taught or learned while they're in school, many of them did not receive that or have not received that. And so we have to work collectively to educate the whole child, not just putting a punitive sanction, but really getting to the root of it by utilizing our social workers, our school counselors, our school psychologists, just to get to the mental processes that a child engaged in to demonstrate the behaviors that have caused us to look at it attentively. And so I want us to recognize that while we know that children can't learn when they're in a classroom with a disruptive child, we also need to recognize that when children are sent out of the classroom or sent out of school, it doesn't correct the behavior without the appropriate supports. So what we need to do when we're talking about the equity aspect of it, and we're talking about looking at our discipline policies and practices, we need to make sure, again, that we are meeting the needs of the whole child, giving him or her what it is that they need to begin to continue to grow and to develop in a positive light so that there are no disruptions in the classroom. I am a firm believer that if a child comes to school mentally unprepared, no matter what we do, how much quality instruction they receive, they're not going to be open to receiving it. And so we have children who come to school who are hungry. We have children who come to school who are impulsive. We have children who come to school who have disabilities that are coded and they're classified as emotionally disturbed. So what we begin to do as a nation and as a school is discipline a child for a behavior that we already identified as being out of his or her control. That's why they have the additional supports. Not every child has an IEP, but there are some children who have behavioral concerns that need to be addressed, and we need to confront them with the appropriate social workers, which is why we've added social workers to our staffing, with the appropriate counselors. That's why we have counselors in our schools, but also making sure that there's a space where we build relationships. And so children don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so when we send our children into our classrooms, that's where that relationship begins. And those teachers who have positive relationships with children usually have minimal disruption in their classrooms. And so it's most important that we embrace all of our children, to meet them where they are, not where we think they should be at that time, but to meet them where they are, particularly not knowing their backgrounds and their backstories. So we're continuing to do that work, Mr. Alston, so that contributes to the equity piece as well as the discipline piece. Because what we don't want is for children to fall through the cracks, because if we don't address it now, we're going to pay for it later on. And when they become adults, that's why we look at much of the research in terms of the school to prison pipeline, because this is where it begins.
Questions? Any questions or comments?
Yes, this is Ms. Hilton.
Yes, ma'am.
I first want to thank the Dr. Knox and Mr. Williams. Working in the prison system and dealing with youthful offenders. Dr. Knox, you hit it on the head. The restorative practices, putting humans back into humanity. Children brains don't develop like adults. They're still children. So discipline statistically does not work. If you start when they're younger and you just discipline, it does not work. And I was glad to hear of the training of the SROs, having to work with SROs as well, unfortunately, that come to pick up a 18 or 19-year-old. So the training, the cultural diversity training, mental health awareness training, those things are very important. And as you said, you have to meet the child where they're at, because we don't know what their background is. So you need to focus on the behavior. The behavior aspect is where you feed that child. And once you show them a different way of thinking, then you will start to see that behavior change. I'm a witness to that. So I want to thank you on that. Was very, I was glad to hear that, especially about the MOU. And so I guess, Mr. Williams, the MOU, does it function similar to an SOP? Because I heard you say that it's different depending on the area. Did I hear you correctly? Mr. Williams?
You're speaking in reference because we have the city police and the county sheriff department.
Correct.
That's what I was speaking of the difference.
Okay,
And we're trying to merge those efforts.
okay, okay. So, do you have the capability of knowing exactly what their training encompasses before they're placed in the schools?
Well, a lot of that is outlined by, if you look at our board policy, the state law, legislators outline what an SRO training has to be.
Okay,
So we just have to make sure that they have those certifications, that we don't have the specifics. And that's why we had the add-on piece, that's all agree that would be beneficial for them to have, because they want it as well.
okay, thank you.
And if I will, there's also guidelines outlined in the NASRO guidelines, which is the National Association of School Resource Officers, and they actually have a convention once a year where SROs from around the nation come together and they talk about best practices, talk about trends, and ways in which, again, as officers placed in the building, they are officers in the school, not officers enforcing law from the judicial system, but instead from school law. So when you said the SOP, there are some similarities, but we do have some specifics in terms of the uses of force, if you will, when it comes down to a school. And as I stated earlier, the SRO not being viewed as a disciplinarian, but instead being utilized as a support. If a crime is committed, and then the SRO steps in, but not for disciplinary action as it relates to the administrators and or the teacher of record for that child, or teachers in the building for that matter.
Correct, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, I saw you had a question.
What both of you have said, in that when I say discipline, I mean, that's the start. Whenever he's removed from the classroom for whatever reason, that starts the process. And the first question probably that I would do if I was the administrator there would be saying, okay, what's the problem today? Because this doesn't sound like you in the classroom, and so tell me what's going on. You know, and you find out all those things, but that's still with the control of the classroom is what I'm talking about. And like Dr. Knox said, the teacher that has a good relationship with students usually does not have that much discipline problem, because they set a standard at the beginning of the year and they hold that standard and they keep students engaged and all those kind of things. So I agree with both of those, what both of you have had to say. However, the control of that without getting out of hand through the year in the hallways, this sort of thing, and explaining to the students at the beginning of the year what's expected of them. Many times they're not told what's expected of them, so they have to figure that out as they go. So that's my point on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments?
Yes, question.
Yes, ma'am.
You talk about training with the SRO officers and the administrators. What are your plans for teachers and training?
Annually, we do a training for all staff to include teachers. The reason we started with the SOs and administrators, because that's the chain of command filtering process. But we also provide the teachers, provide the administrators with a training specific for the teachers, the template of the PowerPoint that they can add additional stuff like their building level rules. When teachers do it to the students, they can add their classroom level rules. And we did that so that at all levels, everybody's hearing the exact same thing. And it is a working process. The discipline training, for example, is done instead of once a year like we used to do in the past, we do it every semester. So that in your high school, because they change classes that semester, so the classroom rules and stuff are a little different. And for the younger groups, that's elementary level, they'll get it as well the second dose. Because of the Christmas break and the Thanksgiving break, we have to constantly keep that information in front of them.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we will move on to policy ADA. The Executive Director for Communications and Community Engagement, Michelle Galloway, saw that she joined us as well, provided an update on the work being done with policy ADA, school district goals and objectives, specifically updating the mission and vision of the district. A team was put in place to review the vision and mission statements for presentation to the Board of Trustees, which were shared at that meeting. The current vision statement reads, Sumter School District will educate all students to embrace diversity, act responsibly, and contribute positively in a competitive global society. The recommended vision statement is, Sumter School District educates, empowers, and enriches the lives of every student in every school every day. The current vision statement is, the vision of Sumter School District is to equip students to be responsible, successful, and productive citizens in a global society. Recommended vision statement, the vision of Sumter School District is to provide a high-quality, diverse curriculum to ensure our students acquire the knowledge, skills, and core values necessary to be successful in their community and across a global society while caring for other students' social emotional needs, for our students' social and emotional needs. Discussion included community and staff input, also solicited of the trustees, was received when developing the proposed vision and mission statements. Is there any comments or questions regarding the revisions to the mission or vision statement? And Ms. Galloway, thank you for joining us. If you want to introduce yourself and there's anything that you want to add to the discussion.
Hi, good evening. I'm glad to be able to join y'all tonight. As Mr. Austin said, we are embarking upon the process of rewriting our 5-year strategic plan. And so, as you know, a strategic plan guides what an organization is, who it serves, what it does, and why. It also articulates how an organization will know that it is successful. So a key component of the strategic planning process is examining our vision and our mission statements, which drives our strategic plan. And so a lot of work has gone into this process. We started back in 2019 with our Teacher Advisory Council with a very extensive activity that involved pretty much 5 guiding questions that we went through to develop a draft for a mission and a vision. We also involved our We also involved our administrators on this as well, and then pushed out surveys to our community so that we could get stakeholder input. So one thing I do want to mention, like with the mission and vision, that a vision is our school district's goal, where we hope to see it in the future. The mission provides an overview of the steps planned to achieve that future. And so keep in mind the vision is concise and easy to recall, whereas the mission is lengthier and more explanatory in nature. So this information was presented to the policy committee, then to the full board. They have pushed it back to the policy committee for further review. A recommendation was to combine a current vision statement and a recommended vision statement. And so we just need to push it back to the full, to the policy committee to see what direction they want to take with the recommended vision and mission.
Thank you, Ms. Galloway. Any questions or concerns or input from subcommittee members regarding the vision and mission statement recommendations or the revisions that are currently being proposed?
Would you please read it one more time?
Yes, sir. The current vision statement is Sumter School District will educate all students to embrace diversity, act responsibly, and contribute positively in a competitive global society. The recommended vision statement is Sumter School District educates, empowers, and enriches the lives of every student in every school every day. And then the current mission statement is the mission of Sumter School District is to equip students to be responsible, successful, and productive citizens in a global society. The recommended mission statement is the mission of Sumter School District is to provide a high-quality, diverse curriculum to ensure our students acquire the knowledge, skills, and core values necessary to be successful in their community and across a global society while caring for our students' social emotional needs. And as Ms. Galloway mentioned, the full board mentioned combining the current mission statement with the recommended mission statement. And that has been pushed back to the policy committee for further review.
I like the revised mission statement personally, but that's just one vote.
I do as well. I like what was recommended.
Is everyone okay with the recommended vision statement as well?
Yes, I prefer the revised version. It's more short and to the point, and I can remember it.
The mission statement is longer.
Yes.
It's really long.
Okay. Any more discussion on the vision or mission statement? Okay. The next policy update is Open Carry Act. There was discussion regarding the concern of this act and persons being allowed to open carry on school district premises during non-related school events or when our facilities are used by individuals after hours. Additional discussion will take place to involve the Sumter County Sheriff and City of Sumter Police Chief. Mr. Myers is in discussions regarding the appropriate language to be included in the policy. He is also reviewing all facilities to ensure the proper signage is posted appropriately regarding concealed weapons. Is there any discussion? And Mr. Myers, if I can ask you, where are we with ensuring the appropriate signage is placed? Or Mr. Williams, either.
We have, we've been working to ensure that all of our schools have the proper signage. We've checked all of our schools. And in some cases, there were some signage, and we had to ensure that all schools had the signage. And Mr. Williams has been working with that, and he can give us an update on what he has acquired over the past few weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Yes, we're waiting on the official quote from the sign company to purchase signs for all of our buildings. And we did look at the concealed weapon as well as our right to search signage that goes along with that. And those right to search signs are on the way from the State Department. That's a sign that they have to provide to all schools. So we're hoping in the next few weeks we'll have those signs in and where they belong.
Any other discussion?
What are we trying to decide about that?
With the governor signing into law the Open Carry Act, and that the schools are community buildings and at times they are used by outside entities or after hours for other events, and just ensuring that concealed weapons are not on our premises.
So that's all we're talking about,
Yes.
is just putting the signage up?
Correct.
Okay.
And ensuring there's a policy in place so that we're able to govern accordingly. Anything else? Okay. Steps moving forward, the policy committee, this is just part of the update. The policy committee will receive additional information to have further review on the open carry law and the policies regarding equity and school resource officers. The recommendation at the time to the full board included first reading of policy ADA, goals and objectives, and policy ADB, base coverage remain in place for the time being. And then in addition, it is recommended that the temporary administrative rules of EB-R, maintaining healthy environments, EEA-R, student transportation, IHA-R, and IHA-E, opt-out of on-site instruction, JE-R, student attendance, and KI-R and KI-E, visitors remain in place because they are sound safety practices. They may be updated by the administration according to the circumstances. Administrative rules EBC-R1, remote work, EBC-R2, remote instruction, and EBC-R3, virtual board meetings, were developed in a way that allows districts to keep them as emergency policies relating to instruction, staff, and board meetings in the event of a long-term emergency that can be enacted upon such times. These items were listed on the agenda for board's consideration, and the board approved those actions for those to remain in place, as well as safety best practices for sound safety practices, as well as in the event of a long-term emergency. Is there any other discussion of the policy updates that's been shared with the subcommittee? Hearing none, we're down to item 4, steps moving forward. And you guys feel free to jump in, but as far as recommendations, I heard about the cost of the equity audit was one of those. And when it came to the SROs, just making sure, I know Ms. Loney, you mentioned the district having more input about the selection process of SROs in our schools. And Dr. Gamble, I heard you mention the joint meetings between the SROs and administrators. And I believe it was Ms. Bannister that mentioned the meeting with teachers as well and the training of that. Mr. Anderson and Dr. Corley, you mentioned discipline, and Dr. Marnox addressed that as far as the social and emotional learning aspect of addressing discipline in our schools. The other recommendation I have is the vision and mission statement. I think it was the consensus of the subcommittee to go with the revised mission and vision. And Mr. Myers and Mr. Williams spoke to signage concerning concealed weapons and the right to search. And we're awaiting those quotes and the signs from the appropriate entities. Did I miss anything as far as recommendations to go back to the full policy committee? Hearing none, we're down to the closing of the meeting. Item 5.1 is closing remarks. Once again, thank you so much. This is our first policy subcommittee meeting. Thank you for offering your time. I know this is a heavy lift, but I think we have a great group of individuals and a diverse group of individuals that will provide valuable input to move the policy committee forward and to move Sumter School District forward. So once again, thank you and welcome to the policy subcommittee.
I have a suggestion.
Yes.
I looked back through my emails to see if we had been sent these suggested, recommended policies in advance. My brain doesn't function quite fast enough to really absorb everything you were just telling us.
Okay.
So I would really like to have the recommendations in advance. I mean, to not have anything, not having read anything, not having anything in front of me, some of this stuff was just like, what are we talking about? And it doesn't give us an opportunity. What just happened hasn't given us an opportunity to do any research ourselves. I mean, I just feel like we're sitting here kind of rubber stamping something I haven't even read.
And we can send those out now to everybody. We can send the information that Mr. Austin read.
Thank you.
Okay. We will take that in consideration and make sure that's done before our next subcommittee meeting. Thank you for that suggestion. Is there any other suggestions from those that are joining us virtually? Once again, thank you so much. I look forward to working with you in the months to come to address our policy issues that govern our school district. So thank you once again. Hope that you all have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you again at our next policy subcommittee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this meeting is now adjourned at 6:59 p.m.
Thank you. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you.